I'm Tony Cisneros, owner and operator of Alpventures World War II Tours. And today I'm here at the Normandy American Cemetery, located in Colville-sur-Mer, on the bluffs of Omaha Beach. The cemetery has 9,387 war dead, including 41 sets of brothers, 307 unknowns, and 3 Medal of Honor winners. But every single person buried here has a story. We'll never hear them all, and there's still much to learn about D-Day itself. There are many things about this campaign that are misunderstood, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. D-Day.
Meet the World War II experts who work on the battlefield. This is the Bunker Boys Show with your host, Tony Cisneros.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bunker Boys Show. If you're even remotely into World War II, you know what to do. It's episode 6 and we're halfway through season 2, so it's time for Paul Woodage to be back on the show. Paul is the founder of World War II TV. That's a YouTube channel where he does battlefield live streams all across Europe. And he does multiple shows per week. I'm super excited to talk to Paul, and we're going to be discussing some of the top misconceptions about D-Day and the Normandy Campaign. Hey, Paul, it's great to have you back, sir. It's been a long time since we had you on the show, episode 2 in season 1, and I know you are a busy man. I have been watching you grow your brand there, World War II TV channel, and I commend you, sir. It's amazing. You're getting more and more subscribers and more views on your live streams there. So I just wanted to ask you how that's all going, and tell you that we're watching and we're trying to promote it. So can you tell us just a little bit about what's been going on with World War II TV lately?
Well, thank you very much, and it's good to be back. It does seem to have been a long time, but yeah, no, I mean, very simply, as you know, with the Bunker Boys, it takes a long time to build up that kind of head of steam and the following. There's so much out there, there's so much content. But what I'm doing now is I'm trying to set up little schedules of shows with theme weeks. So I've got in this month, in February, I've got an Iwo Jima week, I've got an RAF week, I've got a Poland at War week starting tomorrow, and then in March I've got a Great Escape week, and then there'll be a Burma week. And that way, by bringing together 3 or 4 shows of the same theme or the same subject, they sort of advertise each other, and you can have one that's more academic, one that's more a battlefield study, and that's what I'm working on now, is trying to make it look like there's a bit more planning involved, as opposed to just haphazardly just accepting historians on a who's available this week kind of notion, if you know what I mean.
Sure. And you have had some incredible guests, Paul. You're actually speaking with guides that are out on the battlefield, right?
Yeah, I mean, on Monday, for example, we're doing Operation Veritable, which is one of the Canadian assaults in the ETO, and I will be in my house, my studio, and then there'll be 5 or 6 cameras out, if the snow isn't too bad, at sites, connecting via their phones to me, and then I can broadcast. The historian explains the battle, and then the camera angles follow from location to location, on site. And, it's all done with mobile phones. It's not done with professional gear, but it's live. That's the point, is that where people are watching me do it there and then, that the camera teams are there on location. It's on YouTube. People can react to me. They can say, what's going on over there? Oh, it looks a bit cold there. Yes, it's what it would have been like that 75 years ago, that kind of thing. And you get that connection, which I think is so important.
Super important, and that's awesome. What a great thing. So I hope you definitely keep that growing, Paul. And want to remind people to visit your website, which is worldwar2tv.com. But you're also on Patreon, which is patreon.com/World War II TV.
Everything is just World War II TV. Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, YouTube.
So today we wanted to do something fun, and I'm really excited because this is our first sort of top 10 list. And we wanted to talk about some of the misconceptions that you and I, as tour guides, have discovered. With groups over the years, there's a lot of preconceived notions about D-Day, about what happened, about the results and the outcome, and so forth. That is often skewed when it comes to the Americans and the British and so forth. So we thought it would be fun to do this list, and of course you did the heavy lifting on this. You came up with the list, and so we thought we'd just go through 10 of what we feel are the top misconceptions about the D-Day landings, right?
Yeah.
So so number 10, as far as the D-Day landings go, the misconception of that there was a plan B. My assumption was always that if things went terribly on all the beaches, that the idea was they were going to move everybody to Utah Beach, and that was going to be some sort of an Alamo. But you tell me, was there a plan B for the Overlord operation? Did it get to that point? Were they considering, all the beaches being a disaster?
Essentially, there isn't a plan B, because the analogy I wanted to use in this case is that it's not like the success or failure is on the throw of a single dice or the turn of one card. It's a series of it's a series of gambles, if you like, or 50-50s. So think of it as the Allies, we're the casino, and the Germans are the person going in there and placing their money on the roulette wheel or whatever it is. They may win one hand at poker, but they're not going to win every time. The house always wins. And so the thing about D-Day is we may have a tricky start on some, maybe an airborne drop will go wrong, maybe a beach will go a bit difficult at the beginning, but then we're going to go at it again with a second wave and a third wave and a fourth wave, and there are more aircraft, there are more bombers, there are more naval ships we can bring in. So it's not all, as some people think, on this one single event. We're going to make D-Day work by keeping on putting in until it does work. And so that's why there doesn't really need to be a plan B, because plan A will work, because we will just keep hammering at it until it succeeds. And the Germans, in a sense, don't have that second. They only have that one card to play, which is their beach defenses.
Number 9, the Germans were elite or they were terrible. In other words, we often hear, they did so great there, or we hear that they were all young boys and old men. What was the real situation, Paul?
Well, that's it. Historians will tend to plump for one of those things. You get, particularly, let's take Omaha Beach, the German 352nd Division. I've read and seen this described as an elite division. It is in no way at all is it an elite division. It's pretty good. It's well trained to some extent. It's got reasonably good equipment, but it's not elite. Elite is Fallschirmjäger. Elite is Waffen SS. But likewise, as you say, it's not terrible either. There are lots of old men and there are some young kids around there, but it seems to be that we can't accept that there's a mid-ground. And the reality is the German force is somewhere in between the two. They're not all young kids and they're not elite. They're a pretty good formation when you take them as a whole. But that doesn't seem to be the way we look at it. We need to label them as, oh, they were terrible, or oh, they were brilliant and fearsome. No, it's somewhere in between the two. It's finding that balance between those two shifting points of view that I think is so key.
I agree. It was what you're saying was really more of a hodgepodge mix, of replacements and combat experienced troops. But I think in movies, a lot of times we get, these depictions of Germans fumbling around and, not knowing what they're doing. And that's a whole nother story or show, I'm sure. You've talked a lot.
Yeah, there's been people who said that a lot of the Germans behind the beaches had hardly been trained on their rifles. They didn't. That's just not the case. That is just not the case. And likewise, the elite idea. Oh, they were all. No, they hadn't all fought in Russia. Look at, and this is where, and maybe you won't. This is beyond the show. Is that there hasn't been enough study of actually what the German forces are bringing to this battle. And now with the release of archives, we can actually look at the organizations of the German divisions. We can look at how many horses they have, how much ammunition they have. We can look at what machine guns they're actually using behind the beaches and not just say, oh, it's MG42s or it's old Polish stuff. We can actually find now it was 70% whatever and 30% something else. And that's because of the access to the information that for years really, it was always available. We just didn't know how to access it as English-speaking enthusiasts. But now the people who are investigating are providing this data, and it's the time for the historians to accept that there is this data from the German side and start incorporating it into their own work.
I totally agree. We need to take into consideration, information in archives from all these sources. Some may not be as good as others, but we need to at least look at it all, right? And then, as you say, analyze it. Okay, so number 8, we've got Allied tanks being inferior to German tanks. That a lot of Americans, we tend to think that these Sherman tanks, we had to have a bunch of them to knock out a Tiger tank. So is that a real misconception that you've found with groups that you've had in Normandy?
Yeah, absolutely. And generally, there are books, there are model kits where you have that Tiger tank on one side, Sherman tank on the other side, or Cromwell, or Panther, or Panzer IV, and we compare the fronts of the pyramids, if you like, of the two opposing armies, and that is not the fair way to look at it. What you have to do to understand the armor and its role is look at the whole triangle of support behind it, and that's where the Allies win, because the German armor may be on a basic, yes, the armor's thick on a Tiger, yes, the gun is bigger, yes, it's better defended, but you've got to look at how easy is it to maintain, how much fuel the Germans have from it, how can they repair it when it goes wrong. And you look at how the Allies have got almost perfected systems by 1944. The Canadian, for example, the First Army had perfected their stages of a tank gets hit in combat, they take it back to one stage. It's like triage with the wounded. They look at it and say, can this be repaired? Can it not be repaired? The track can go back on again. In so many cases, you look at these examples, being able to put back into action a tank the next day, having been hit the previous day, and the Germans cannot do that. Every German tank that's knocked out in Normandy, there is nothing to replace it with. There is nothing to come up and repair it. The overly complicated staggered road wheels you get on Panthers and Tigers. So you can't just get a wheel off and look at the suspension behind it. You look at the simplicity of the Sherman. That is why it works. It's because your average American farm boy can take it apart. Your average American city boy can drive it. Even a simple thing like the ability to drive. In 1941, when America came into war, something like 60 or 70% of American males had driving license. They were able to drive cars. The Germans, it's less than 10%. So you've just got to get them familiar with mechanical vehicles in the first place. And therefore, in America, you have, if there's 70% of people with a driving license, that means there's lots of people who know how to fix them. You've got workshops and engineering plants who know how to take these things apart. And that is where, when you compare the two beasts, the Allied one does win, because it has this huge depth of technology and support and logistics behind it. And as you said, we can actually afford to lose a couple of Shermans to take out that one tie, because there are 4 more Shermans behind that one, and maybe one of those Shermans we lose, we can replace it anyway. The crew can walk back and pick up a new tank. And that's where this idea of comparing Tiger against Sherman is misleading. You've got to look at the whole infrastructure.
I love talking to you, Paul, because I learn something every time we chat. So this is great. All right, number 7. The Normandy Campaign got bogged down. Again, Americans, we tend to think, okay, we got on the beaches, we fought hard, but we got stuck on the beaches until the so-called breakout took place. What have you found as far as misconceptions about that being bogged down, the campaign?
Well, you've just got to look at the original projections that people like Montgomery made. And the original projection was that it would take 90 days to get out of Normandy. We did it in 76. And not only had we done it in 76, we had bested 2 German armies in Normandy. Yes, some German units were able to get out and fight another day, but not very many. A few 9th and 10th SS ending up in the Arnhem area. But we have completely knocked out those armies. And that we'll come to that with one of the next points later on. But we are not bogged down. What's happening is the German army is destroying itself against us, trying to delay us. And as we're building up a bigger and bigger arsenal behind that front wave, we are just committing into combat so many more men that when we do break out of Normandy, we've got, again, like with the tanks, this massive great arm behind us. So, yeah, look at the original data. 90 days was projected. And not only that, we come under on the casualty projections as well. It took less time than we predicted, and less people were killed because we use steel and artillery particularly. That's one of when Americans beat up Montgomery for not getting corn, all those things, and we'll talk about that later. What they are forgetting is that Montgomery is using the steel of the shells of his artillery formations to break the Germans, not lives, because we Brits don't have many lives left. We've committed so many men since Dunkirk and Singapore. We can't just throw divisions in. We've got to use that curtain of steel to push the Germans back. So that artillery takes time to assemble. It takes time to push forward. And so this idea of us being bogged down is not the case. We are allowing the German army to smash itself to bits against our advance.
Mm-hmm. And that brings us to the next misconception, number 6, which is that Monty failed to get Caen. We think, well, Monty couldn't take Caen, so we finally took over and broke out, Operation Cobra. But that's nonsense. The fact that Cobra succeeded was based on what was going on with the British forces holding the Germans at bay in Caen. Would you not agree?
No, absolutely. And firstly, it's not Montgomery. It's Dempsey. It's Dempsey of the Second Army. Now, Dempsey had done Sicily. So when we landed there, the objectives were 9 miles inland from the beaches, and the British landings got to those positions 9 miles beyond the beach within that first day. That's how it worked out there. So when they come to plan Operation Overlord, there's no way that Dempsey can tell his army that they're going to go for a lesser objective on this one. It's like, hang on, we've done it before. Of course, so you've got to set the goal ahead. You don't when you're little. If you're teaching baseball to your kids, Tony, or something, or to your friend, you don't tell them, look, you're a bit hopeless. You're not going to win a single match this season. You say that you're going to go on and win the league, because that's how you motivate people. So the British Army that has been fighting from North Africa to Sicily, you set these goals that are aspirational. You don't say, well, we'll just try and get off the beach and not die. That's not going to motivate people. And the obvious thing inland from the British beaches is Caen. So you say, we're going to get to Caen. Now, actually, what's interesting is, what does he mean? What does Dempsey and Montgomery mean by Caen? Do they mean getting your feet into the first perimeter of Caen? They mean getting into the city centre? Or do they actually mean, which is what they do mean, get to the high ground beyond Caen when you can start building airfields? And the thing is, that was going to be a bridge too far, to borrow a pun from a different campaign and use it to D-Day. So the thing about the setting Caen's objective is that it was aspirational based on what they previously achieved in Sicily. And again, and I'm not going to be the Brit who's bashing Americans here, but hey, it's my turn. I'm the only Brit you kind of use. So when the Americans say, oh well, you Brits were slow up near Caen. Yeah, well, look at July. For every German tank that was in the American sector, there are 5 or 6 in the British sector. So the best part of the German armor, 9th SS, 10th SS, Panzer Lehr, 12th SS, 21st Panzer, what's left of them, they're all up in the British sector. You're dealing with Americans with lots of terrain issues. You've got to go up to Cherbourg, you've got to go to Saint-Lô. I'm not belittling what you're having to do because it's there's some tough stuff to do there, but you're not taking on the German army yet. That you do later on in the war. So again, referring to my earlier point, while we're being stuck near Caen, what we're not being stuck near Caen is what's happening is again, the German armor is wearing itself out. Every day they counterattack against our pushes, they lose their vehicles, they can't replace those vehicles, we gain another mile. And not only do we gain another mile, they've lost their ability to reinforce. So this idea of slow to get Caen is again, I think, a bit of a fallacy.
All right, so moving on to number 5, Paul, we've got the Allies had complete air superiority over Normandy. That wasn't exactly the case, was it? Well,
this is about language. There's 2 terms, air superiority and air supremacy, and they're used now by a lot of people as interchangeable words, and they're not. They're slightly different things, and their precise definitions have changed over time, and the American and Canadian and British versions are slightly different. Air superiority means you are likely to meet enemy aircraft, but they're not going to really stop your control of what you're doing. So you're going to lose a few aircraft shot down here and there, but air supremacy means they just can't even get any aircraft in the air at all. And so when people talk about air supremacy, and superiority, they get these terms a bit mixed up. And because we had 11,500 aircraft in the skies allied on D-Day, and there weren't that many German aircraft, we completely dominated the skies. And we did, except that all through June, July, and August, the Germans are still able to shoot down aircraft, and particularly the Germans are controlling the night with the night fighters and things like that, the ones they're bringing up from Brittany. And the other thing that gives the German Air Force, that isn't very big then, an advantage is we're not hard to find. In mid-July, if you are a lone German aircraft and you manage to, in the middle of the night, get through and you get anywhere near the beaches, there are lots and lots of targets there. There's fuel dumps and depots and engineering parks and vehicle parks and things like that, and you can do a hit and run and maybe cause a lot of damage in that time and get back again before the Allied fighters get into the air again, because we're not good at the night. The Germans have got the night mastered in Normandy. And so this idea, when people talk about the complete overwhelming air superiority or supremacy, depending on which word they use, they're forgetting that lots of Allied pilots are still losing their lives all through June, July, and August. Lots of missing aircraft crash reports are being filed there because the Germans are still making themselves felt. And, of course, don't forget that with the number of aircraft we have in the skies, we're also having accidents. The number of aircraft that we are losing all through June, July, just because wingtips collide when 2 Spitfires take off a runway near Bayeux or something like that. Because the more aircraft you have in the skies, just imagine those who've flown out of, an airport in the States, be it Chicago or New York, whatever, and you see, a couple of dozen 747s there. This is 11,000 aircraft we have there, in a sky without being controlled by computers. There's no air traffic control guy plotting everybody with satellite. And if all the high level, low level stuff, fighters going over, fighters coming back, transport aircraft, people being wounded back, there's a lot of congestion in the skies over Normandy. Of course, there are fatalities. Of course, there are crashes. So because we have a mastery of the skies does not mean we are not incurring casualties. That's the point I wanted to make with that point, is that there are still lots and lots of very brave US Army Air Force pilots who are being killed, as there are Brits and Canadians and Poles, because the sky is still a very dangerous place over Normandy.
Yeah. And, with that, you mentioned over 11,000 aircraft. Where do you get that many combat experienced pilots, right? I mean, that's the other issue here, is they just didn't have that many pilots with, very many hours of airtime, let alone combat experience. So I totally understand that, and that's an area that I think we should touch on. The air war is generally something tour guides don't talk about enough, as they don't the naval aspect, because you're there, you've done it yourself, Tony, you're there with a group, you can relate to your group the ground because you're on it. You can say there's Pegasus Bridge, there's Saint-Lô over there, there's the crossroads there.
but relating to something that's happening at sea, it's hard to relate to. Well, 15 miles over there is a ship that's firing shells. You can't connect to it in that same way you can by showing someone a bullet hole in a stone wall. So we're all guilty of not giving enough credit to the role of the other two services in Normandy. We focus too much on the army.
I agree, and a lot of the success of the army was at the credit of both the British Royal Air Force and the Army Air Corps.
Absolutely.
Hedgerows, this misconception that the hedgerows caused all the problems in Normandy. What can you tell us about that? Our number 4 on
2 points. One is Normandy is a big area. You've been here a lot. There are lots of hedgerows in some places, and there are other parts of Normandy where the hedgerows don't exist at all. The plains south of Caen, for example, you've got more of a kind of a forested kind of area east of Caen where the British Airborne were. You've got around towards Avranches on the western coast there, very flat. So hedgerows are not everywhere. So there are some troops who come and fight in Normandy, be they British, American, or Canadian, who never see a hedgerow anyway because they're not what's in front of them. The other thing I say, this is when people say, "Oh, well, we got bogged down by those hedgerows." My response to your viewers is, okay, then you are God. You get to create the terrain that we fight in Normandy. What would you choose to have in front of us when we land? What would you like? If you don't want the hedgerows, what would you like? Do you want desert? Do you want tundra? Do you want forest? Do you want the Ardennes? What do you want? And they go, because what's going to guarantee you the advance better than the hedgerows? What's going to not delay you? And they go, well, I don't know. So because actually what's delaying us is a German army. The point is we have to best the German army that is defending Normandy. They don't like the hedgerows any more than we like the hedgerows. They're not ideal for anybody. Read the accounts by the German commanders. They don't like fighting them in them either. But the idea that the hedgerows are somehow the single thing that's stopping us pushing land, I think where it comes from is it's an easy coat hanger to put the blame on. Rather than saying that perhaps our own tactical prowess wasn't always up to scratch. Maybe we haven't learnt yet how to engage the enemy to the best of our abilities, that we get better at later in the war. That's admitting your own fault. No, let's blame it on the hedgerows. No, it's not us. Yeah. No, we're doing fine. It's the hedgerows. It's all the bloody hedgerows. And I think that has become this coat hanger of blame, and the truth bears some better examination to understand that actually there's some pretty decent German units we've got a best there. And so again, Tony, I'll ask you the question: what terrain would you pick for Normandy? What do you think would suddenly make our armies push inland better?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I mean, it's because what you're saying is it's not going to make a difference, right? I mean, it's not going to make much of a difference, really.
Soldiers will bitch about whatever the terrain is they're fighting.
Yeah.
That's what they do. They bitch about the volcanic islands of Iwo Jima. They bitch about the forests of the Ardennes, the mud of Italy, the forests of the Hurtgen, the malaria of Berber, whatever it is. There's a terrain there that you will have to adapt to. And every single terrain the British and American and Canadians fought in, we did eventually adapt to look at how we started out in the jungle campaign, and by the end of the war we got Merons Marauders and the Chindits and stuff, and we're getting better than the enemy at dealing with that terrain. And the same thing applies to Normandy. We may have struggled in the first few days after June the 6th, but roll forward a few weeks and we've got our tactics worked out. We're finding them a far less of a problem than we were earlier. So it's whatever terrain it is we find ourselves in, it will be annoying at first until we get good at working our way through it. And that is what I find about the hedgerows, is that wherever there's going to be there's going to be stubborn Germans, and you've got to find a way of clearing them out, and that's it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that brings us to number 3, which is the misconception that the hedgerows were a surprise, that they were a big surprise.
Yeah, that one really gets on my nerves. It is. People say, of course, we didn't know about the hedgerows. Yes, we did. You have to define what you mean by we. When I say we know, what I mean is the Allies had done entire geological, topographical, archaeological studies of the terrain they were going to find in Normandy by aerial photos, going back through old French and English touring books and memoirs and novels. We knew where the water points were. You can buy the copies of all these pre-D-Day SHAFE planning documents. We had all the hedgerows all marked out. We described how the drainage worked. We described all that. We knew all that at a high level. What complicates the matter is eventually something like 2 million men came through Normandy in the Allied army. Now, if over the course of March, April, May, June, you train every single guy on a 6-week course, PowerPoint presentations of their day about the terrain they're going to find in wherever it is they're going to land, because don't forget they don't know where they're going to go yet. At some point, one of those 2 million men, or more like it, hundreds of those 2 million men are going to realize, hang on, that's Normandy. I've been to Normandy. He's describing Normandy, that bloke over there, that sergeant there. He's describing Normandy. I went there on a school trip in 1929 or whatever it would be, you know? So the point is, we have to land at a location where the enemy don't know we're coming. And as we all know, the Germans really kind of thought that we were going to go to the Pas-de-Calais, and they have the majority of their really good units kind of hedging their bets up there. And we keep the secrecy of Normandy being our main focus secret from the Germans, and that was it was better to have that secrecy than it was inform our men about the terrain they were going to fight in. Better to get them there alive and not have them wiped out on the beaches, and let them then work out the means of going through the hedgerows, than brief them and allow the fact that somehow the Allied soldiers will find out the hedgerows, and then maybe that German spy that we don't know about hears that we're going to Normandy, and everything we've planned for 2 years falls apart just when you need it to be a success. So we did know about the hedgerows. What isn't always understood is the need to keep an element of that secret to protect from that knowledge the men who are landing in Normandy. I hope I made myself clear on that.
That makes perfect sense to me, Paul. And this next one, number 2, this is an interesting one. The misconception that Hitler was asleep late, and we know he did sleep late, but that he failed to move the tanks or didn't want to move the tanks, right away. What can you tell us about that morning, and in particular Hitler's lack of moving armor into Normandy, in those first couple weeks?
Well, I think what happens with this one is people kind of have borrowed from 2 or 3 different bits of fact and put them together as one. Now, the first thing is that there are different versions of people who were at high command as to when Hitler did get up that morning. Some people say he was up by 9, some people say it was 11, some say it was earlier than that, some people say he got up, kind of read the papers, had his orange juice, went back to bed again. There's different opinions about what he did or didn't do that day. That's irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. The point is, let's say he is wide awake at 1 a.m. that morning, and he's told by someone in Normandy that you know what, Adolf, there are aircraft flying over Normandy, there are paratroopers jumping out of them, there are gliders standing out. I think this is the invasion. Right. At that point now, on the morning of June the 6th, no, he cannot, there's no unit he has that he can move from anywhere that is close enough to the D-Day beaches under his command that wouldn't already be doing that already, if that makes sense. What people are talking about in this case is they're talking about the armor that is up behind the Pas-de-Calais, the armor that's kind of around Paris, other armor that's in central France. You've got the Das Reich division of miles and miles and miles. They're 5-6 days away from getting to Normandy. It took them 3 weeks to get here in the end. What people are talking about is those divisions there. And no matter how early Adolf Hitler knows about the invasion, short of pressing some magic button and Captain Kirk teleporting them to the battlefield, there's no way he can get those back units to the front.
Side 6, start with side 6. Move fast and clear those murder holes. Want to see plenty of beaks between men. 5 men to shoot the opportunity. 1 man's a waste of ammo. Just stand out of your weapons. Keep those actions clear. And I'll see you on the beach.
All right. Well, number 1 for misconceptions on D-Day, that Omaha Beach was a near disaster. That Omaha Beach was the bloodiest beach, and of course, as Americans, we, Omaha is so dear to our hearts and all this. But set us straight here, Paul, because my understanding is that as bad as it was on Omaha, there were other beaches that were nearly as bloody, or that, what you were talking about earlier as far as the at the end of the day, what was the result? So tell us just a little bit about how you feel about when everybody says, "Oh, Omaha was the bloodiest beach by far, and it was a total disaster."
Well, firstly, we've got Mr. Spielberg kind of to thank in some ways for leaving us with that, because of the brilliantly evocative opening 27 minutes of Saving Private Ryan that I saw at the theatre 3 nights in a row when it came out, whatever it was, 23-4 years ago. That it was this close run thing. So mathematically, let's do some math first, okay? Mathematically, as a percentage of the force they landed, probably more Canadians died on Juneau than Americans on Omaha. Okay, as a percentage.
Okay.
Firstly, secondly, it's how we define the word casualty. And unfortunately, over the years, like with superiority and supremacy, we've got this idea of casualty mixed up with fatality. Now, in terms of fatality, there are about 900 Americans killed on Omaha Beach, which when I say that to a lot of people, they are surprised by that because they've heard this figure of thousands. No, thousands of casualties, about 900 killed. And this is not me saying this. You go to the Bedford National D-Day Memorial there, they've got a really good database now that they've got a pretty good firm idea now of exactly how many Americans died on D-Day. That's what everybody, paratroopers, fighter pilots, Navy, a whole lot there. And it's, Joe Balkovsky, who did the seminal work on Omaha Beach and Beyond the Beach 20 years ago. He came up with a figure about 850. We've now bumped it up to about 900 now killed on Omaha Beach. But that is from a landing force of 2 complete divisions, the 1st Division, the 29th Division, and the Engineer Brigade, and all those associated units, the armor battalions, the tank battalions, all that guy there. So about 900 killed of a landing force and people debate how many actually came ashore on that first day, but let's say 50,000 in that intended first day invasion. So that's the math taken care of. And also, by the way, Omaha is not the worst defended beach. If you're talking about worst in the amount of German bunkers and machine guns and weaponry behind the beach, Sword has the most defenses concentrated over the invasion sector of the 5 beaches. Well, I think, in fact, Utah second, then possibly Omaha. So that's another misconception, that Omaha's were more defended. It is maybe the worst terrain. That's an argument you can make. I'm with you on the terrain. That kind of curve bay there with the bluffs up there, it is less than an ideal place to make a first wave landing. So I'll give you the terrain, but not the number of German defenses. The next thing is, my definition of Omaha Beach is, it is a successful landing that started badly. Because the majority of those 900 men who were killed in the first wave. That's when you get the tragedy of the Bedford Boys, A Company 116, landing on Dog Green, and Alex Kershaw wrote about it. He's been on my shows on World War II TV, talked about it. And you get the moving stories of the twins, and then the same thing kind of happened down on Fox Screen, where the big elements of the Big Red 116 Infantry land and Easy Red as well, like that. But the thing is, going back to the Germans again, the Germans, the machine gunners behind the beaches there, the artillery there, for Rommel's plan to work of stopping the invasion at the water's edge, when that first opening barrage of German machine gun fire and mortar fire kind of down there on the landing craft ramps coming down, the men get the landing craft there, that overwhelming first response has to be a deal breaker. That has to wipe out that first wave. And when the smoke clears and the dust settles, despite the fact that the first wave did suffer 85% casualties, dead and wounded on Omaha Beach, that still means 15% haven't been killed or wounded at all. And some of those 85% who are only wounded are able to regroup and reorganize and crawl over to the guy who is in charge, the sergeant there. And then the second wave comes in, and then the third wave comes in. It goes back to what we were saying about the no backup, the no plan B. Is we have not finished. We've only rolled the first dice. The Germans have spent. Yes, they've got some artillery in land, they can keep firing there, but those machine gunners behind the beaches there with their boxes of ammo, when they've gone, okay, that didn't happen, they're firing in bursts and blah, blah, blah. But an hour, 2 hours into battle, they're going to have used up the majority of the ammunition. And they look behind me and go, well, where's the rest of the ammunition? Well, we've used it all, Gunter, says Fritz, and they see that first wave detriment down then the beach and the dead bodies there behind the obstacles, but they can see beyond that from Omaha Beach, depending on where you are as a German, you're going to be able to see about 3,000 ships down there, and they keep coming towards you, and they keep coming towards you. And there's, as you know, Tony, because you've been there, by certain parts of mid-morning in Omaha Beach, there are companies coming ashore with no one being killed at all. Mm-hmm. And by early afternoon, late afternoon, you're getting some bulldozers coming ashore and things like that. It's this. We've got tripped up on what Saving Private Ryan did, and it's the language we use, the disaster of Omaha Beach. And I'm rambling now, but I'm on a roll now. Let's take Eisenhower, okay? Let's take Eisenhower. Now, Eisenhower, it's June the 4th, it's June the 5th, okay? And he's sitting in Southwark House there. And if you like, and I'm not being, anti-religious, let's say God appears in his fireplace. God, the real God appears there and says, Ike, I see you've got an invasion coming up there in a couple of days' time, and I'm assuming you're gonna want it to go the Allied way. And Ike kind of goes, yeah, I'd like us to win. The Germans, I don't think, the Nazis are, And God goes, yeah, I'll give you the victory. I'll give you but I can't just let you have it without some people being killed, because the Germans have Gotthard Minns on their belt buckles. They pray to me as well, And you can cut this out, Tony, if you don't want to use this bit. So, what the point I'm making is the casualty figures that we ended up with. If God had said to Eisenhower, okay, deal or no deal, Ike, you've got 156,000 men coming ashore that day. I'll give you 10,000 casualties in total, killed or wounded. Would you take the deal? I guarantee you, Eisenhower would have taken that deal. He would have probably taken 20,000, and he might.
I was just going to say he probably would have thought that was a good deal.
And that is the way you've got to look at the Normandy invasion. Yeah. Is the first of an eventual 2 million force coming through Normandy to push its way towards Berlin. And the reality is, you're not going to get away without people being killed on D-Day. And despite the tragedy of those 900 sets of parents who received the letter saying that your kid in the first wave, A Company 116 was killed on Omaha Beach. That's a tragedy. We'll never be able to relate to what those families who lost their son went through and all that. That is a tragedy. But on the grand scheme of things, as part of the overall need to defeat Nazi empire and push our way towards Germany, the casualties we took on D-Day as an Allied force were completely within the what we would have accepted. And so Eisenhower would have taken that. He'd have taken that deal right now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's a really interesting point. And I agree with you totally, because by all accounts that I've come across, he was being advised that this was not going to go well. That worst case scenario, it was going to be a really bloody situation. And of course, again, not to diminish those men who were killed on D-Day and those next few tough days of fighting, but overall, I totally agree with you. I think that that this was it's an accepted risk, right?
Here's the thing. We talked about aircraft earlier, Tony. Okay. Here's the thing. Let's say there are no Germans anywhere near Omaha Beach. There's not a one. They've all gone to the football. They've all gone to see Hamburg play Berlin. It's the cup final. I don't know. Whatever. If we're putting 50,000 people into that arena with mortar fire, we're going to lose people anyway. Yeah. Some poor, panic-stricken, terrified guy in charge of mortars is going to give the wrong coordinate or going to give the wrong elevation, and mortars are going to land on a squad of men ahead of him. Aircraft are going to collide wings. Someone's going to be crunched by a landing craft ramp coming down his head. A tank's going to go off the side and fall down. Men are going to drown. Men are just going to simply drown. Look at the Peter Caddick Adams' seminal work, Sand and Steel, came out last year. You're talking over the course of the training going up to D-Day, as many Allied soldiers were killed in training as were actually killed on June the 6th, over the course of the first few weeks of 1944. When you take in, and it's not just Lapton Sands and Exercise Tiger, by the way, that's one of them. That's one of the contributing factors. There's all the other things, because you're doing live fire exercises.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens when 50,000 men jump out of wooden landing craft onto a beach under a live fire situation. No Germans there at all. Still, some are still going to die. And it happened earlier in the war, in the Aleutian Islands, when we landed there. And the Japanese had left a month earlier, and we lost however many guys it was because of those things happening. Because heart attacks.
Yeah.
How many people just gonna just keel over? I'm not being disrespectful here. I'm just saying you've got to look at it as a numbers game.
Yeah.
And it's tragedy. All those men died. It's a war. That's what happens in war. People die, and the cost that was paid to ensure D-Day was a success was completely within what we had projected, what we'd accepted, and it's a mathematical way of looking at it. When I'm on with a group on tour on Omaha Beach, and if people are watching this going, he's being very dismissive of the lives of allied soldiers, there's two hats you can wear. There's your analytical hat and there's your emotional hat, and there are times to have your emotional hat on, and that's when you go to the Normandy American Cemetery and you walk among the graves there, and you lay your flowers and you go and visit some people and you pay your respects there, and that's when you think about the individual toll and loss of life of people who die for their countries. And then there's the analytical. I put you that hat on, you go, you know what though, 10,000 casualties out of 156,000? That's amazing. That is the result of 2 years of sound preparation and studies done by a very, very dedicated team of professionals who have ensured that despite the things that are going to happen and people are going to be killed, we have minimized that. We have taken that down to the lowest figure we can possibly do by the incredible organization and structure behind Operation Overlord, with all our medics and our triage systems and our recovery systems and our divers and all the things we've got there, and our air-sea rescue launches in the channel there to rescue the pilots that go down. We have done every single step. We've taken every single step to make sure that we have reduced as much as we can the casualty rate to an acceptable level, and we achieved that, which is why Omaha Beach is far from being a disaster. It's one of 5 landings that were ultimately incredibly successful and paved the way for the liberation of Europe and the end of the Third Reich.
Yeah. Wow, amazing, Paul. We could be.
I rambled a bit then. I'm sorry, Tony, but you've got me on the subject. You can tell.
Don't apologize.
How many years of being a tour guide, that there's these things that people need to kind of be given a bit of a stop thinking the things you're thinking. Stop. Yeah. Analyze these things. Look at it in the broader sweep. Understand the big picture here. Don't get bogged down by the Tiger tank's better than the Sherman tank. Don't get caught up in that. It's not worth getting stuck in those things. Read widely. Read British books, read American books, read German books, read French books, read a first book, a second book, and a third book, and then eventually you'll work out for yourself that some of the things you kind of took on board from these sound bites are actually not worth the paper they're written on.
I totally agree. That's what I'm always telling people too, Paul, is if you want to know about something, find as many books as you can on it. Don't just read one book and say, okay, I know about that subject, but read as many as you can, and then you start finding the common denominators and piecing it all together. And as you say, it is important. It's not fair to those guys who maybe don't get the credit or this and that, but it's important that we try to set the record straight, and we're just trying to add more pieces to the puzzle. But Paul, thank you, my friend. Thanks for taking the time. I know you're busy, and I look forward to seeing you again. And good luck again, continued success on World War II TV. Everybody, be sure to check out Paul's channel, his World War II TV programs. He does live streams. He's got guests, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, that are on the battlefield, sending you a live stream from the beaches, from the forests, from the foxholes, from the hedgerows, and incredible job, Paul. Keep up the good work, and we'll see you next time.
Well, thank you, and basically ditto exactly with what you're doing here. All of us who are pushing our way forwards to find new means of conveying history. It's all part of the greater good, and we're in an era, beginning of a new era now. Whereas the veterans are sadly going to be not with us for a few more years. We're in a new era of going back and reevaluating and analyzing again, and taking on this data, taking on the ability to push on. I've just came back from a meeting. I was out today we're going to be holding a Normandy History Festival next year in Normandy, which you're welcome to bring over with Bunker Boys. We're going to bring together at a conference center historians of America, Britain, and Canada, and tackle over the course of a week and bring school groups through there and have archives there, and again try and present a modern academic and fresh study of the Battle of Normandy, and look at where we've got bogged down in the wrong details over the years. Look at how we've come to understand what the German army was. We've come to understand sometimes our own Allied failures and how we learnt from our mistakes, how we got better at doing things. So there's a good era ahead of us, Tony, and it's privileged to be part of it. I think it's as long as I live long enough, it'll be a good era.
That's right. Well, like I say, keep up the good work and take care of yourself too. Okay.
You too.
Be safe. All right. Thanks again, Paul. Hey, that's it, everybody. That's our show, episode 6. We hope you enjoyed hearing Paul Woodage talk about some of the top misconceptions we have about D-Day and the Normandy campaign. Join us in 2 weeks when Reg Jans, co-host. That's right, Reg Jans will be back, and he'll be interviewing Carl Wooters. Carl is an expert on the 106th Infantry Division, the Golden Lion Division. They got some flack there in the Battle of the Bulge, so Carl will be setting the story straight for us with Reg, and that's in episode 7 coming up here in a couple weeks. Everybody, we really appreciate your support on Patreon. You can find us there at patreon.com/bunkerboys. Of course, our website is bunkerboys.com. All of our episodes are free to watch, both seasons 1 and season 2. And we're on Facebook at facebook.com/WW2bunkerboys. Everybody, take care. America, I salute you.